gets is a very good way to do an assessment. Now, it's not this is not a you wouldn't do this on an exam, but you would do it as a homework problem. And so, anybody want to say anything about that? Ever tried it?
I had a professor, Lisa Pruitt, in all of her classes. She has tests of understanding. That's what she calls them. And on all of them, they have like 10 or so true and false questions. And as part of like an in-class exercise, she had everyone like come up with true false questions, and we'd kind of like pick a few and go through them. And that was a good way to like actually think about all the concepts that are maybe a little trickier, and engage the whole class in discussing them. And then even some of them ended up on the exam, so it was kind of nice way of doing it.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's interesting. That's good. So if they come up with a really a good one, then it might appear on the test, and since they get a nice bonus because it's their problem, they automatically get it right. All right, very nice. I see. And she actually shares them in class to actually discuss them.
Yeah, it's kind of like an in-class exercise. Like she passes out note cards, and everyone writes their questions down. Yeah,
very nice.
Kind of pair off and discuss them. Yeah.
You know what? Actually, it would be interesting to do that in Zoom, because you could do it with either polls or hands up, right? Or you can have yes/no question answers over there. Like it. Okay, really good. I also it's interesting. I didn't think of that form because I was thinking of more of a longer form type of problem, but just having yes, true, false. That's nice, because then you can essentially have to. It's basically things you have to think about right there and come up with an answer.
And then of course, if it's false, you have to explain why it's false or how you would make it true.
Right, and the most interesting ones are the ones that are a little bit. There's two answers, right? And these two different ways of looking at it. Good. Okay. Excellent. How about anyone else about making up? Someone who we haven't heard from. Salim, just hold back for a little bit. Someone who hasn't spoken up yet today. What about a problem that you have ever either made up, or have you ever experienced that with a professor who have that as an assignment, or is it pretty rare to make up problems? What's the downside of doing that as an instructor? Any downside?
Yeah, before Professor Ryder had us write like one exam question before each exam, and then she said that she would, I think, like potentially select one to be on the exam as sort of like an incentive to make your question be the best, because then maybe it will be on the exam and you have, you already know how to solve it because it's your question. But yeah, was kind of like my only experience with it. But it was interesting because I remember at one point I like wrote a question because I was like, oh, this seems like it'd be an interesting question, and then I was like, I couldn't actually solve it. And so it led to like a discussion about whether or not this type of question, is something we know how to solve or not based on what you learn in the class.
Okay, good. All right. Well, that's right. So sometimes an open question that becomes like a research project, right? But I liked your point also, because from an instructor's point of view, it gives you material, right? It could give you nice ideas for exam questions. And you can always change it around a little bit if you wanted to make it, a little different. But it's harder to grade this. In other words, if there's part of the assignment is to come up with a new problem and solve it, that is very hard on the graders. Okay, because they have to really spend time on each one, because they're all different, right?
In this case, I think it was mostly just completion.
Okay, right.
Or just like effort, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, good though. Anyway, think about that as a strategy or a tool that you guys could use if you're teaching. It's a really nice one, and it's not obvious. I think it's rarely used. All right, then it talks about here is this is something I really liked, is related to multiple choice questions. They said it's very tricky to come up with what they call the distractors, which is the you know the right answer, right? But then you have to come up with the other wrong answers, if you will, and you have to think about those. And that actually requires some skill, because they have to be sufficiently different, but not obviously. So you don't want something that someone who hasn't even, you know, just totally winging the class can come in and just sort of guess it, you know, with an educated guess. Like, by the way, most of those, you know, driver ed tests, you can kind of guess the answer, right? So thinking about that, and so there's one clever idea here on page 220, which is, I really liked it. I never heard it before, but it was, so here's the idea: is that the answer is a numerical answer, but you give them multiple choice of 10 different values from low to high. And then you say, choose the answer that's closest to the correct answer. And if the correct answer is right between two values, choose the higher one, right? Round up. Now, why is that cool? Why does that work? Well, it's interesting because it is a multiple choice, right? And yet so it's easy to grade, but you have sort of finessed the issue of finding the distractors, because it's just some range, right? And they have to solve the problem and then figure out where it fits in that range. So I thought it was interesting. I've never seen an exam with that on, but it's a nice idea that would facilitate. Let's say you were going to do an electronic grading system, that it's a way of getting multiple choice answers out. Okay, so that's another nice point. He talks about partial credit and, you know, that importance of that for grading, how much students really appreciate that. Again, we're talking about grading exams now. And then he talks about, one issue is about open notes and open book. Let's talk about that for a minute. Most of you, I would imagine, are in engineering or from the school. We don't use, you know, it's closed book, closed notes, right? But today, especially with COVID-19, I think there's a real trend toward open notes exams, right? Because it's essentially impossible to prevent that. So what do you think about it? I'm curious what thoughts are. Someone else who hasn't spoken up. How do you feel about open book versus closed book exams, either as a student or as an instructor?
For me, as a student, it depends. Like, if the exams or the quiz is 24 hours, I would like that to be open book. But if it is not, like if it is like specified for the class time, I think open book is a lot more of like a wasting time for you if you would just go back to your notes to find something related to questions. Like, I find it really difficult to do, like, be on time and solve the problem really fast and going back to your notes.
That's interesting. I see. So you're saying that actually it can make it harder to have open book.
Yes.
Because then you can actually absorb valuable time. If it's a time test, 1 hour or something, that you would get sidetracked.
Yeah. It takes so much time to go find like something like an equations in one of the, you know, one slide somewhere. I mean, sometimes the professors will make the questions really hard if they make it an open book. So that's like a disadvantage, like especially if you're like doing the exam on a specific time, like 1.5 hours.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I just came from a faculty meeting, and one of the trends seems to be that everybody is now doing take-home exams, basically overnight. So there's not even a time issue. Why? Because of many people are asynchronous, right? Taking it in different time zones. But they say, well, we just make it much harder. I don't know if students are loving that, you know.
In my case, if it is harder, it's all right for me. As long as it's 24 hours, I'll have more time. But if it is like a 1 and 30 minutes exams, and it's a little bit hard because it's an open book, I don't think I like that.
Okay. How do you feel about length? I mean, let's talk about that for a minute. You know, traditionally it's always been during the course period, but who else has a preference in terms of getting it over with versus a 24-hour take home? Anyone else who hasn't spoken up?
Yeah, I think I got a little bit of a preference for getting it over with. It's just kind of how I am as a test taker. But also now as like a GSI, I have no desire to grade a 4 to 5 hour exam. So getting it over with is generally better. But to accommodate asynchronous folks, this is just something that I saw in a class that I took last semester. They basically had a 24-hour open period where you could start the exam, but then it would just lock you out after 2 hours. So everybody still got the benefit of kind of the asynchronous, but and starting when you wanted, but you still had sort of a time limit. Because one tendency for like longer take-home exams is that they just sort of make the what would have been a 2-hour exam sort of in class or constricted to the class time, maybe even closed book. Is now a 7 to 8 hour exam that takes that's just given 24 hours to do, which doesn't really help in my head.
Well, I think a couple of points you made. One is that the take-home exam is much harder. It's much harder to grade, right? It's much more, this is much more complex. And but your other point, how do they do that? Because if you have a 2-hour window, I mean, I don't understand how can you avoid someone screenshotting and sending it to their friends who start it later?
I don't think you've completely eliminated that in sort of any take-home exam.
Okay.
So I think you still face the same trouble. I just think it sort of like constricts the length amount or the amount of time that you have to sort of input your answers, or if it's an essay, kind of work on it.
What exactly is the purpose of an examination?
Good. Okay. Good question. Good philosophy question. Right. I mean, I don't think there's. Well, how do you feel? What do you think, Preston?
I was asking that to you because I don't know what it seems to me that it's just supposed to be a knowledge check, and this is the same question I have for what is the purpose of homework? What is the purpose of lecture? What is trying to be accomplished? And depending on you, the teacher, the GSI, whatever you're trying to get across, will take different forms. Yeah, that's a good question too, Salim.
But no,
engineering, you're just regurgitating equations that you were thrown, in lecture, or you plug and chug. I often am writing answers in Python because I have so many numbers to calculate. It's like, okay, at a certain point, what am I just multiplying, dividing, adding, and subtracting versus doing actual nuclear engineering,
Right. So I think this is where, we're going to get into a long conversation, and I want to respect everyone's time, but I'm glad you brought it up. I will say a couple words on my perspective. One is that it depends on the class. I think that if you're taking, freshman calculus class, you're really trying to learn some fundamental techniques that you got to learn, and you got to learn how to use them, right? So it's a little bit like what Robert Reich talked about in the economic model. You're trying to basically convey this material, and I don't know how much is gained by, the learning community there, although some is, right? You're helping each other get acquainted, but it's more, there's not much ambiguity. There's really no ambiguity, right? I shouldn't say that, actually. There may be, in terms of different ways of taking a derivative or and doing an integral. But what I'm getting at is that that is very different, right, than a course where you're exploring, let's say, research ideas or anything where it's more open-ended, a design course or something like that. But I think that in my sense, in my mind, when I'm teaching the class that I teach every year, a database design class, but it's got a lot of math in it, is the homeworks. I'm I want you to learn the material, to just try it, and I'm not interested in grading, giving you penalty. The only reason I give a small amount of, and we do grade the homeworks, is just as an incentive to get them done. But I'm fine with students doing them together, and particularly I say, wait until you get the exam the homework solutions, and then study those solutions really carefully, because that's the moment when everything sort of should make sense to you. But if you can't get a problem, don't worry. That's actually what we expect. It's normal that you wouldn't be able to solve everything. But then you'll see the solution, and then that process of saying, here's where I went wrong, that's very valuable as a teaching aid. Exams are different. Exams I really do want to assess the students, and I'm trying to be fair. In my mind, I'm also, I think I mentioned last week, I want to encourage students. So I want them to feel good about the material and their own performance. So I tend to be a little bit easier on the grading because I want students to feel good, but I also still do need to differentiate. So I really always have some questions that are very hard that I expect only the top 5 to 10% of students can solve. And that's because I want to be able to discriminate those students who are in the A plus range. But I have a lot of A- and B+ and B students, but I think that's fine. I don't think that's a problem. Because again, I want students to feel like this is a material that they're enjoying, and then they'll learn it better. They'll spend more time on it. So that's the way I think about it. I think that midterm helps to kind of gauge everything that's going on and gives you a check-in. So students aren't unprepared when they hit the final. That's pretty important. And the other thing I'll just mention on this note is that I'm really big on giving them practice midterm and practice finals. So I give them the last year's midterm usually, and I say, here, do that under 1 hour or 50-minute time constraint, and then we go over it in class. And so they have really good prior of what to expect on the midterm. That's what I like to do, is that they really have a sense of, they're not surprised. There's no like, there could be a hard problem on the problem. There will be, but it's not the whole form of the examination does not catch them by surprise.
On that note, I think it's really important to make sure that the practice exam does align with the exam that you're then writing, because I have had it be the case where we're given a practice exam and I cannot stress it enough, in absolutely no way represented what we experienced on the exam.
I hear you.
I just experienced it like yesterday. I had an exam the same way. The practice exam was super easy. The exam was like really difficult and long.
No, I'm with you 100%. Believe me, it's very similar. The same format, the same structure in my case. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. That's really terrible. That's worse than nothing, because then what you've done is it's one thing to give them a harder exam and then an easier one in practice. But the other way, that's terrible. You've totally miscalibrated everyone.
Yeah, it creates a super stressful situation.
Yeah, no, so there's two things that's going on when you're testing. There's the form of the material, and then there's the content, right? And if you're giving them the form that is completely unfamiliar, that's really, really hard. It's like a double stress. So, this is a balance. And, as instructor, if you're making up these problems, as you have experience, this week, it's really a challenge. And I always say, it's much harder for me to make it up an exam than for you guys to take it. It really is. I stress out a lot. And the other thing is, the worst thing that happens is if there's something ambiguous and you kind of, got it wrong, and then they all can't solve the problem and it's your fault. Terrible. I literally stress out about that every time I give out an exam, and I stay in the room to, if need be, make a correction on the fly if everybody's getting confused. So it's hard work to do that well, and really requires effort, both in homeworks and in exams. So I want to let you go, but just say that there's a lot of more information. I find that chapter 11 here is it's got quite a bit of information in it. It talks about, there's a section here on homeworks and on projects, grading, and also even just on numerical grading, how to do curves, set it to a bell curve. So there's a lot of good things here. If you're teaching in class, it's a really good reference. So take a good look at it, and let's call it a day. I really appreciate the discussion, as always, with you guys, always stimulating and fun. And so the plan for next week is that we're going to, the homework is to again, just to write up about the, really short, just a title and a couple lines about what the topic you're gonna do on your final essay, and just to get you thinking about it. So submit that. Then next week we're gonna go into time management, actually. So there'll be there's a TED talk there. Actually, I'm gonna make that an assignment because you guys don't want to watch a talk in class. So I'm gonna move that. Okay, I'm just gonna put it in there. Again, check the syllabus for updates. I just moved the time management talk. It's a TED talk on time management. And then we'll talk about some other time management techniques. And that'll be hopefully, if we're smart about time management, we'll finish that one in 1 hour. So I'll have a short class next week. And then the next week, we'll get into diversity, equity, and inclusion with the white fragility articles, which will be, I think that's going to be a full 2 hour discussion. We've got a lot to talk about. Okay, so thanks everybody. Have a great week. Stay healthy. See you next week.
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Bye.
Hey, Professor.
Yeah.
Can you, next week when I come back in, the computer, it wouldn't let me log back in on the computer because you had kicked me out from that account. So I'm not sure if the link will keep that next week, but I don't want to. Will it reset, or do you know?
I think it'll reset. Do you want to just try it right now?
Sure.
I have to leave and then come back, but I can do that.
Okay, sounds good.
Actually, Michael, let's do this because actually that could be a problem because we have to. The recording will get. I might end up messing up the recording. Right. So let's do this. You have my. Let me give you my phone number. You can text me. Okay. I'm at 415-722-5649, and you can call or text me if you have any problem getting in, and then we'll figure out a plan. Okay.
Okay,
right.
Sounds good. Yeah,
Good.
it was kind of weird. I've never seen that before, but
I know.
yeah, I logged back out, came back in, and it said the host kicked you out, so you can't come in anymore. Never seen that.
No, it's a problem because they put up all kinds of new security levels very recently, and all kinds of problems are happening. Yeah, so I think the system is like overcompensated right now. So hopefully it'll be fine next week. All right, thanks, Michael.
Yep, thanks.
I had a really quick question about the homework. If we write a couple lines about the final essay, are we stuck with that topic, or can we change the topic if we end up finding references that, or something else, or change our minds about what we want to write?
No, you're stuck with it forever. I'm not going to budge on that.
Oh.
So, you know me well enough, right? You know I'm really tough on those kind of things, right? I'm teasing you. Come on. Of course, you can change it. You can change it right up until the night before. I just want you to think about, get going on something. And if you find something even more exciting, fine, no problem.
I've kind of written down like maybe 5 to 6 topics already. I don't know. It's probably going to take a bit of time to narrow one down.
All right, good. Nice problem to have.
Great problem. I really enjoyed the past homework. I thought it was really cool. I had just a really quick comment about time limits that I just wanted to talk about real quick. Something I realize is that, in a 24-hour exam versus a 3-hour exam or a 1-hour exam, sometimes I feel like the unlimited time can be distracting. Like sometimes if I give myself an hour or 3 hours to finish something, I'll probably score higher than if I spent like 8 hours on the same thing, just because you feel like you have more time. And I don't know, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, I agree with you. There's two things. One is I do like to sleep on something. There's something about that often helps. And, I don't know if you have this experience, but if you can you truly struggle with a problem and then you sleep on it, a lot of times you wake up and you're like, oh, now I see it. You know what I mean? I find that is very interesting. And so
but also that, and the fact when you're like 2 minutes left or like 30 minutes left, suddenly that like makes you stop doing what you're doing, and then it just sparks another idea. or, you know, in the last 5 minutes of a test, suddenly you just remember, oh shoot, and then you just write the solution in like 2 minutes, whereas normally you'd like, it would spend, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, the phenomenon of, you know, the test taking. You know, I think they've done some, you could actually check on this. It's like there's some fMRI studies with people taking tests and how their brain sort of changes, you know, response as it goes. I think it's really interesting because, you know, it does, and I'm sure it depends on the person. I always like taking exams. It's interesting. My daughter likes them too. It's just kind of, I love the sort of energy of doing it and then finishing it, you know, and just feeling that rush.
I like it. I really do. I like the way I describe it with my friends and like my families. Sometimes I just like, I like sinking my teeth into exams. I like the, like, I have an exam in 3 days, like the preparation, like getting exam gear up, like, I don't know, like exam season is just, I don't know. It's masochistic.
Yeah, no.
It's very masochistic in a way. I don't know. Then you're suddenly done, and then you're like in the rush zone when you're just like waiting for the grades to come out, and then grades come out, and then, you know, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, and sometimes it's just like, well, okay, meh. And I don't know. It's just that whole.
Yeah. No. And I love that moment when you get the results, right? And that's also very, you know, it's so much fun to like, you're like waiting, and then you see, you know, you did well, you got it. Or sometimes every once in a while you didn't, but you know, it's just that energy, that rush. It's really fun. Yeah. No, so I'm not in favor. You know, some schools, I think Santa Cruz, they don't have grades, and I was like, what? I would not want that. I want grades. I love getting a grade, and I like, actually, as an instructor, giving out grades, because I love to reward students who are really engaged. So on that note, Salim, I've got to run, but I just wanted to ask you, you know, you could take this class for 3 units if you wanted. And yeah, I mentioned this at the beginning, but I didn't come back to it. But there's 2 things. One is you can do the certificate on teaching, which sounds like you might be interested in.
Yeah, so I attended all the workshops so far.
Oh, great. So you'll be able to get that. And then I will also be happy if you want to do an extra credit for this class. It's a 3rd unit. And then maybe the answer is that we can think of, maybe you write a longer essay. We can think about something that would, you know, sort of justify that, because you seem really engaged with the class, and I really appreciate that. So let's think about, you know,
I like
what that would be.
I'm
Okay.
enjoying it. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about that. I think I will need to do that. That is extremely, yeah. I think I want to do that. I'm already spending a lot more time than, you know, I probably should, but, you know, I'm really enjoying it. I want to be a professor, and, you know, teaching is kind of something I'm trying to. Oh, I started the GSI position this week too, so.
Oh, great. Okay, good. Well, hopefully this class will come in handy. But, you know, you can, you know, so let's think about that, where, you know, again, if you're really busy, it's not a big deal. But like, even you could say, I want to do a longer essay, you know, a 10-page essay or something like that. That might be enough to justify giving you an extra unit. But I'd like to think of something that would, you know, be fun for you and fun for me, that would give you the opportunity. So think about it. I think we can do that pretty easily later. I just don't know if we should wait too long, but if you want to do it, I think you just petition the department. What department are you in, actually?
I'm in nuclear.
Nuclear, but I think you can do this through IEOR, and I'll approve it, and then we'll get that going. Okay?
Okay. I will let you know. I'll think of something. I'm pretty sure there's probably a lot of cool things that we can do.
Good. So yeah, just think of some options, and then let's talk about it after class next week.
Got it.
All right,
Thank you.
I got to run. Take care. Bye.
Thanks.